Welcome to the module on trafficking of children. The objective of this module is to gain the learner a detailed understanding of the issue of the human trafficking with a special focus on child trafficking. The module would provide an overview of the factors responsible for child trafficking. The learner will also get an understanding about the purpose for which the children are trafficked in India, and finally, the module will provide a basic understanding on the mechanisms for controlling child trafficking in India. Sale and purchase of children for gain within the country, intra-country and across borders, that is inter-country, by deceit, fraud or force result in exploitation of the person trafficked is understood as trafficking. Trafficking consists of all acts involved in the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring and receiving of children for the purpose of placing such children in situations of abuse and exploitation. The most comprehensive definition of trafficking is the one adopted by the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crimes in 2000, known as the UN Protocol to Prevent, Suppress and Punish Trafficking in Persons, especially Women and Children 2000, under the UN Convention Against Transactional Organized Crime UNTOC. This convention, also known as the Trafficking Protocol, has been signed by the Government of India. The international community accepted the Trafficking Convention, which was approved by the General Assembly of the United Nations in 1949. The convention calls on the states parties to punish traffickers and to protect all persons against such abuse. It also calls on member states to make suitable provisions for trafficking victims, temporary care and maintenance, to repatriate trafficked persons, and where such persons cannot pay the cost of repatriation, to bear the cost. Convention for the Suppression of the Traffic in Persons, Article 19. Article 3 of this convention says, trafficking in persons shall mean the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring or receipt of persons by means of the threat or use of force or other forms of coercion, of abduction, coercion, okay, of the threat or use of persons or other forms of coercion, of abduction, of fraud, of deception, of the abuse of power or of a position of vulnerability, or of giving or of receiving of payments or benefits to achieve the consent of a person having control over other persons for the purpose of exploitation. Exploitation shall include a minimum the exploitation of the prostitution of others or other forms of sexual exploitation, forced labour services, slavery or the practices similar to slavery, servitude or removal of organs. The Trafficking Protocol, adopted in the year 2000, has brought a widespread consensus on the definition of trafficking at the global level. Child trafficking is an inhuman offence perpetuated against defenseless and innocent children. According to a report by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, one of the 3 victims of human trafficking worldwide is a child. Many of them are subject to sexual exploitation or forced labor. Overall, child trafficking has increased by 5% since 2010, with girls and women accounting for 70% of the overall number of the victims worldwide. Children also represent around 60% of the victims in regions such as Africa and the Middle East. There is no place in the world where children, women and men are safe from human trafficking. The global figures on trafficking represented only the tip of the iceberg. Women and girls are often trafficked for sexual exploitation and forced labor, while children are also forced into combat or to take part in petty crime. Impunity remained a sleepless problem, and the number of convictions remained low despite initiatives to combat trafficking. about 15% of 128 countries covered by the report did not record a single conviction. Trafficking of human beings has been in existence for centuries, flourishing earlier in the form of slave trade. It is now considered as the third largest source of the profits for the organized crime, behind only the illicit drugs and arms trade, generating billions of dollars annually. With the amplification of international and national legal apparatus, trafficking of humans is perceived to be more than a crime. It is a serious violation of human rights, child rights, labor rights, and above all the basic fundamental freedom of a human being. It is perceived by the perpetrators as highly lucrative and increasingly worthwhile, as defenseless women and children can be sold several times over with bare minimum capital investment and risk factors. The existence of permeable borders of most countries, advancement of technology, the impact of the globalization and liberalization, and subsequent alienation from the sources of the livelihoods of ordinary people, marginalization and despondence of rural people, feminization of poverty, and the presence of insensitive politico-legal setup has all facilitated and aggravated the escalation in child trafficking. Although the problem has expanded around the world, the routes for trafficking seem to alter according to the local politico-legal conditions or factors of supply and demand. Magnitude of the problem. India is an origin, source, transit and destination country for trafficking in persons. Women and children are trafficked from neighboring countries like Bangladesh and Nepal to India, and in many cases are trafficked into Gulf countries, the Middle East and Europe. Trafficking primarily takes place for the purposes of commercial sexual exploitation (CSE), as well as for other forms like exploitation for labor and other purposes like organ transplant and forced marriage. According to a 2006 estimate by the United States Department of State, 90% of India's sex trafficking is internal. Trafficking from neighboring countries accounts for 10% of the coerced migration in India, with approximately 2.17% from Bangladesh and 2.6% from Nepal. There is no comprehensive statistical data available on child trafficking in all its forms and purposes. Most cases go unreported and there is no single law to address the issue. The net result is the data available on child trafficking are inadequate and scattered. There are no reliable estimates or numbers on the trafficking of the persons. Various factors like clandestine nature of the activities, clientele wanting to remain anonymous, low visibility of the exploitation, victims' fear of the police and other exploiters ensure that few details are released, and it is hard to collect data on the issue. Since empirical data is hard and difficult to get, most of the research studies are based on either case studies or empirical research on studies of limited size. Women's rights organizations and NGOs estimate that more than 12,000 and perhaps as many as 50,000 women and children are trafficked into the country annually from the neighboring countries for the sex trade. Estimates vary, but a safe guess is the several thousand Bangladeshi girls and 5,000 to 7,000 Nepali girls are trafficked out of the country and primarily to India each year. It is estimated that Nepalese children constitute 20% of the estimated 2 lakh Nepalese prostitutes in India. Girls as young as 7 years are trafficked from economically depressed neighborhoods in Nepal and Bangladesh to the major prostitution centers of Mumbai, Calcutta and Delhi. In Mumbai, an estimated 90% of the sex workers started when they were under 18 years of age, half are from Nepal. India is also a significant source and transit country. NGOs in the region estimate that some 6,000 to 10,000 girls are trafficked annually from Nepal to Indian brothels, and a similar number are trafficked from Bangladesh. 27,000 Bangladeshi women and children have been forced into prostitution in Indian brothels. Report on the worst forms of the child labor compiled by the Global March against the child labor says that with an untested estimate of 2,70,000 child prostitutes, the problem of the child prostitution in India is widespread and quite visible. According to the ILO estimate, 15% of the country's estimated 2.3 million prostitutes are children. The traffic is controlled largely by the organized crime. About 3 lakh to 5 lakh children are engaged in prostitution. Besides, there are child soldiers in every insurgent group in Manipur, including apparently children under 15 years of age. The lowest age recorded as 11 years. It is estimated that the number of child soldiers is between 6,000 and 7,500, which is equivalent to around 50% of the total group membership. It is further claimed that the recent trend is to induct more and more girls into insurgency movements in order to avoid suspicion on the hardcore activist. The number of girl soldiers is said to be between 900 to 1000, that is 6 to 7% of the child soldiers. In the Assam insurgency, approximately 9 to 10% of the soldiers are girls, numbering 3,000 to 4,000 with the lowest recorded age at 12 years. The Nagaland insurgents, which have the strength of 18,000 to 20,000, have 50 to 55% of the soldiers below the 18 years. Causative factors. A careful study of various reports on trafficking indicated that trafficking of the young girls and women mainly occurs due to poverty, illiteracy, lack of access to education and schools, lack of vocational skills and employment opportunities, prevalence of age, old evil practices like child marriages and low status of the women and girls in the society. Utter lack of employment opportunities in their native villages and small towns and the lure of pseudo-urban glamour have forced or allured many women and children to migrate even at the risk of being trafficked. Traffickers are active in most of the backward districts of India. Some of them pretend to work as labor contractors or placement agency personnel. Dishonest and illusionary means are deployed by them. False promises are doled out about prosperous employment, career opportunities in industries, construction work and households to lure the unsuspecting victims, thus causing voluntary migration with deception. Indebtedness of families gives a boost to such shady operations. Causes of the children being kidnapped for trafficking are also not rare. During natural calamities like earthquakes or tsunami, it has been observed that organized group of traffickers take advantage of the helplessness and the misery of the victim in the pretext of relief workers and indulge in large scale trafficking of children and young women. Once they are shifted out of their native place, the victims are entirely at the mercy of the well organized traffickers, who many a times maintain close links with the police and other law enforcement agencies. In many cases, women and young girls are lured to megacities or foreign countries in the hope of obtaining legitimate work where they are paid less salaries. Poverty eventually forces them to prostitute themselves either under duress or in the absence of other options. Most girls who are trafficked in India are sold to brothel keepers. Violence is not always an ingredient in child trafficking, as has been often misconceived. In most cases, the victims are seemingly willing to be trafficked as they are cheated, misinformed, sold by their own parents or relatives, or are otherwise persuaded into the situations from which they usually cannot escape. Case studies have revealed that all or some of the family members were either instrumental or at least aware of the trafficking. Some of the common characteristics of trafficked children in India on the basis of the qualitative analysis based on the case studies are given below. As the first is, they are illiterate or with very low levels of literacy. They by and large belonging to the very poor families, especially from the backward areas. Third, many of them belonging to the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes and OBC category. Many of them are victims of natural disasters and calamities. Some of them are children of those who are displaced due to the developmental projects. Some of them are the street children who ran away from their families. Now, we are going to discuss about the purpose of the child trafficking in India. Child trafficking is not merely a socio-legal issue, it is a symptom of much deeper multi-dimensional issue in Indian society. An analysis of the case studies of child trafficking over a period of time has revealed the following purposes for which children are being trafficked in India. Child labor. This includes bonded labor, child domestic work, agricultural labor, construction work, carpet industry, garment industry, fisheries, bangle making, small scale industries, etc. Second is illegal activities. This includes begging, organ trade, drug peddling, smuggling, criminal gangs, sexual exploitation. This includes forced prostitution, sex tourism, pornography. Entertainment industry. This includes circus dance troupes, beer bars, camel joking, etc. For forced marriage and adoption. Another is child soldiers or combatants in armed conflicts. In many areas of the insurgency and armed conflicts, trafficked children are recruited as child soldiers. Child labor. A survey in India noted that 17% of the domestic workers were under 15 years old and also reported that girls aged 12 to 15 were preferred choice of 90% of employing households. In Chennai, a study found that 25% of the children became child domestic workers before they completed 8 years. Reports indicate that 65% of the children entered the workforce between the age of 9 and 12 years. It is reported that 4,28,305 child laborers are forced to work in the hazardous industries. 25,000 children are employed in the footwear industry and approximately 5,000 children in the silk thread industry in the southern Karnataka. Human Rights Watch estimates that there are 3 lakh children working in the carpet industry and 2,70,000 of whom are bonded laborers. Another 6,000 to 1 lakh children are working in the diamond industry, cutting and polishing diamond chips. Glassware and bangle industry employs 8,000 to 50,000 children. Next is illegal activities. These include a variety of the criminal activities where children are the direct victims. These include begging, for which children are kidnapped, trafficked, sold and even maimed and used for begging. Organ trade. Organs like kidney are removed from the children for organ transplants. Drug peddling and smuggling. Children are used as safe conduits for transporting drugs. Child sacrifice. Many cases of the child sacrifice have been reported in India where the victims are kidnapped, trafficked children. Thefts, crimes. As juveniles are exempted from the ambit of the Indian Penal Code for the punishments in the event of the crimes committed by them, adult criminals and gangs are making use of the children to commit such offences. Sexual exploitation. It is the most documented and visible form of the trafficking. Incidence of the child prostitution through kidnapping is estimated to be a very high. Sex tourism. There are different places in India like Goa, Kogarna, Karwar, Kovalam, Puri, etc. are known destinations for foreign sex tourists who prefer children. Though religiously sanctified practices in the form of Devadasi and Jogini cults, thousands of girls enter into prostitution every year. Many cases of the child pornography rackets were reported from Goa and Mumbai. Unusual growth of the tourism, particularly the emergence of sex tourism in recent times, which has reached global dimensions via internet, has fueled the demand for young girls and boys in sex industry, forcing thousands of innocent children into sex slavery. Child pornography is another form of sexual exploitation of children which generates demand for child trafficking. There is increasing evidence to suggest that India and other South Asian countries are slowly replacing Southeast Asia as the venue of choice for foreigners as there are fewer laws against child sexual abuse and children are cheaper to buy. It is observed that in India, the popular demand for virgin girls and boys who are sourced from less accessible and underdeveloped rural areas have increased manifold in the wake of spread of HIV/AIDS and other sexually transmitted diseases. According to one estimate, the figures of children in prostitution in India range from 3 lakh to 5 lakh. A survey in 1991 sponsored by the Central Social Welfare Board in 6 metropolitan cities in India indicated the population of the child victims of commercial sex exploitation to be from 70,000 to 1 lakh. It is estimated that every year between 5,000 to 10,000 Nepalese women and children are trafficked to India for the purposes of the commercial sexual exploitation. Another estimates points out that 40,000 to 2 lakh women and girls from the Nepal working in brothels in various cities in India. Figures quoted show a high degree of discrepancy and the possibility of ascertaining the authenticity is limited. Some local culturally sanctioned practices like the Devadasi system. Devadasi is a Sanskrit word. Deva means God and Dasi means female slave, which literally means a slave of God, in which girl children were given to shrines ostensibly as dedicated to God, but who then had to face sexual exploitation from certain sections of the society, also expose women and girls to sexual exploitation and trafficking. Pedophilia related tourism has also been reported from certain parts of India, including Goa, Odisha and some parts of Kerala. Adoption. Several unscrupulous adoption agencies indulge in sale of babies who are procured from poor parents. Thefts of newborn babies from hospital wards are also reported. Trafficking for and through adoption is not only an inter-country phenomena, but even exists within the country. The demand for adoption has increased while the number of children legally available for adoption has declined, leading to several rackets. Marriage. For and through marriage. Marriage is used as a ploy for child trafficking. Young girls are taken as brides by the racketeers, and after performing pseudo marriage ceremonies, the brides are sold off for flesh trade. Children are also trafficked for marriage to Arab nationals who employ them as sex slaves. Another dimension is abducting, kidnapping women and girls for the purpose of forced marriage. An analysis of 2014 NCRB data has revealed that forced marriage was the most common purpose of abduction as well as kidnapping, with more than 56% of all abduction and kidnapping having been committed for forced marriage. A closer look at human trafficking in India. National Crime Records Bureau of the Ministry of Home Affairs of Government of India collects data on trafficking through state crime report bureaus and union territories. National Crime Records Bureau data presents an indication of the level or reporting of the trafficking within India and provides an analysis of the trends in various Indian penal code crimes, which includes importation of girls, kidnapping and abduction of the girls, and offences under the Immoral Traffic Prevention Act ITPA. The total incidence of crime relating to human trafficking in India during the year 2014, according to the National Crime Records Bureau data, was 5466 cases. The National Crime Records Bureau documents human trafficking cases under the following 6 crime heads in the absence of a specific law against trafficking. First is buying or disposing any person as a slave under the section 370 and 370A of the Indian Penal Code. Second is importation of girls from foreign countries under the section 366B of the Indian Penal Code. Third is the Immoral Traffic Prevention Act of 1956. The fourth is Procuration of Minor Girls, section 366A of Indian Penal Code. The fifth is Buying of Minor Girls for Prostitution under the section 373 of the Indian Penal Code, and selling of minors for prostitution is under the section 372 of the Indian Penal Code. The highest number of human trafficking cases, that is the 20%, were reported from the West Bengal, followed by Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Assam, Telangana, Bihar, Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra and Haryana. There was no cases reported from Tripura, Mizoram and Lakshadweep, and less than 5 cases were reported from Jammu and Kashmir. Arunachal Pradesh, Manipur, Nagaland and Sikkim and Union Territories of Puducherry, Dadra and Nagar Haveli and Chandigarh. As against 5,466 cases, a total of 4,989 persons were arrested for committing crimes related to the human trafficking during the year 2014. Thus, more than 85% of the offenders were arrested under Immoral Traffic Prevention Act, giving a clear indication that this is the main law which is being used against the human trafficking in India. The National Crime Records Bureau does not include kidnapping and abduction, which are crimes under the Indian Penal Code under the head of human trafficking. However, it is widely believed that human trafficking is closely related to kidnapping and abduction. Therefore, it will be worth taking a closer look at the incidence of these two crimes for an in-depth understanding of the issue of trafficking. According to the National Crime Records Bureau data, the incidence of overall kidnapping, that is section 359 of the Indian Penal Code, and abduction, that is a section 362 IPC in India during the 2014 accounted for 77,237 cases. According to the uniform study published in the year 2006 in a survey for the over 4,000 persons, the survivors of commercially sexual exploitation indicated that reporting of trafficking occurred in only about 40% of the cases. And now we will discuss about the efforts to control child trafficking. India is a signatory to the following most important international conventions regarding the trafficking of the children. First is the Convention on the Rights of the Children in the year 1989. Second is the optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child on the sales of the children, child prostitution and child pornography, that is in the year 2000. The Convention on the Elimination of all forms of the discrimination against children. The third is the Convention on the Elimination of all forms of the discrimination against women in the year 1979. The next is the Protocol to prevent, suppress and punish trafficking in persons, especially women and children. And the next is Declaration on Social and Legal Principles relating to the protection and welfare of the children, with special reference to the foster placement and adoption nationally and internationally. And the sixth is SAR Convention on Regional Arrangement for the Promotion of Child Welfare in the year 2002. The next is Convention on the Rights of the Children 1989, commonly known as CRC, defines a child as a person under the 18 years of age. State parties are obliged to protect children from all forms of the discrimination, Article 2, to protect them from sexual exploitation and abuse, including prostitution and pornography, Article 34, and make every effort to prevent the sale, trafficking and abduction of the children, according to the Article 35. Under Article 39, state parties have an obligation to ensure that victims of exploitation receive appropriate treatment for their recovery and social reintegration. Any child who is below the age of 18 years who is in need of help from the state for its well-being is considered as a child in need of care and protection according to the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act of 2000. Victims of the child trafficking are essentially the children in need of care and protection. National and international pressure to address child trafficking in India has failed to produce results. The Honorable Supreme Court of India has also issued directives to the government to take the matter seriously, but there has been little effort to link increasing cases of missing children with the flurry of trafficking. The country is now faced with epidemic of child trafficking. A recent Indian government report estimates that around 500,000 children has been abducted and forced to work in Indian cities. It would seem that child trafficking is on the rise. In 2010, almost 1 in every 3 missing children was untraced, but in 2013, 1 in 2 missing kids was lost forever. India's National Crime Records Bureau NCRB reported 65,038 missing children in the country during the year of 2012. It is likely that many of them were trafficked, but the official agencies are limited in their ability to estimate the extent of child trafficking, and their estimates fall short of those by researchers and activists. Social workers also complain that law enforcement authorities often fail to deal with cases seriously. Victims mostly hail from poor, marginalized communities and broken families. Even official statistics note that more girls vanish than boys. The official statistics on prostitution related trafficking even show a declining trend. The total number of cases under the Immortal Traffic Prevention Act of 1956 decreased from 11,242 in 2002 to only 2,563 in 2012, possibly because labor trafficking to domestic and commercial sectors is now easier than sex trafficking. It is frightening to realize that there is no comprehensive law on human trafficking covering all grotesque forms and purposes in India. None of the existing national laws or legal provisions define human trafficking per se. Immoral Traffic Prevention Act ITPA 1956, renamed after the drastic amendments to the suppression of the immoral trafficking in women and girls Act of 1956, deals exclusively with trafficking in women and girls for the purpose of prostitution as an organized means of living, but the term trafficking can be found in its title, can only be found in its title and is not defined. Besides, it does not prohibit trafficking for purposes other than prostitution. Strategies to combat child trafficking. The strategies to combat child trafficking are threefold, namely prevention, rescue and rehabilitation in source, transit as well as the destination areas. The fact that the family is either partially or fully responsible for most trafficking assumes immense importance in the context of action against trafficking. Empowering families, especially women, through a variety of activities including formation of self-help groups would go a long way in stemming the problem at the very source, namely the family. Identification of children who are most vulnerable to trafficking and bringing them under the ongoing Education for All Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan and such other social assistance programs would also help the control the problem. Equally important in the context of India is to develop a nationwide community based communication strategy for the prevention of child trafficking. Towards this end, two important mechanisms have to be in place. The first one is a foolproof system of registration of children, and the second is an assisted facility for tracing missing children. Establishing missing children websites and child helplines to assist children in difficult circumstances will also serve as an effective mechanism for interception and rescue. A ratification of international instruments relating to child trafficking, standardization of penal provisions between countries and the willingness to deport, extradite criminals who are involved in such offences wanted in other countries are also essential to check this modern form of cross-border slavery. In an effort to strengthen legal mechanisms, trafficking is included as abatement of offence in chapter 4 of the newly introduced Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act of 2012. Explanation 3 in section 16 of this chapter, which deals with abatement and attempt to commit an offence, says that whoever employee, harbours, receives or transports a child by means of threat or use of force, other forms of coercion, abduction, fraud, deception, abuse of power or of a possession, vulnerability or the giving or receiving of payments or benefits to achieve the consent of a person having control over other person for the purpose of any offence under the act is said to aid the doing of that act. In government sector, the Union Ministry of Women and Child Development WCD is primarily mandated to address the issue of human trafficking. Governmental efforts to combat child abuse got a shot in arm when rupees 90 crore was earmarked in the budget 2007 or 2008 for the Women and Child Development Ministry for its integrated child protection scheme, a right based approach on prevention and protection strategies for children. The total budget outlay for Women and Child Development Ministry has also been increased to an all time high of rupees 5,795 crores. The Government of India also constituted the National Commission for the Protection of the Child Rights (NCPCR) in March 2007 as a statutory body under the Commissions for the Protection of Child Rights Act 2005 to protect, promote and defend child rights in the country. Ministry of Women and Child Development has formulated a national plan of action to combat trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation of women and children in 1998 with the objective to mainstream and to reintegrate the women and child victims of commercial sexual exploitation in society. On insistence from Ministry of Women and Child Development, the Ministry of Home Affairs (MHA) has set up a dedicated nodal cell in the Ministry of Home Affairs for prevention of trafficking. The main function of such a cell would be coordinate, network and provide feedback to the state government and other concerned agencies, as well as share data inputs, best practices, innovations, etc. on a sustained and continuous basis to enable better outcomes. All its meetings will be held every quarter to review the progress in anti-trafficking activities. The Ministry of Women and Child Development runs shelter-based homes, short-stay homes and swadhar homes for women in difficult circumstances. These cater to trafficked women, girls rescued or run away from brothels or other places, and for women, girls victims of sexual crimes who are disowned by family or who do not want to go back to their respective family for various reasons. The schemes provides for shelter, food, clothing for women and children below the age of 18 years through counseling, clinical, medical, legal and other support, training and economic rehabilitation and helpline facilities. At present, over 146 swadhar homes and more than 342 short stay homes are being run in different parts of the country. 3 pilot projects are being implemented by the ministry. The first is the pilot project to combat trafficking women and children for commercial sexual exploitation under the sanction of tradition. Second is the pilot project to combat trafficking of the women and children for commercial sexual exploitation in source areas, and the third pilot project to combat trafficking of children and women for commercial sexual exploitation in destination areas. Based on the favorable feedback on the implementation of the pilot projects, it has been decided to convert these 3 projects into a comprehensive scheme in consultation with NGOs and state governments. The proposed new scheme, which is under formulation, consists of 2 components: one for preventive activities to be undertaken through awareness programs, and the second component is for rescue and rehabilitation of the victims of trafficking for commercial sexual exploitation and provision for the rescue costs, counseling and shelter and other allied facilities. There are numerous voluntary organizations working on the issue of child trafficking, some with government assistance. The governmental measures will have a desired impact only if the government and the civil society partnerships are further strengthened to ensure transparency and much needed trust in the right direction. Summary of this module. In this module, we discussed about the issue of human trafficking with a special focus on the child trafficking and also the overview of the factors responsible for trafficking. We also discussed about the purpose for which children are trafficked in India and the mechanisms for controlling child trafficking in India. Thank you for attending this session.